Thanks for joining on this Wednesday ahead of the long weekend. We decided to kind of not do it on Thursday as we normally would, just because we thought maybe people are already going to be getting ready to be away at that time. And this is a presentation. This is kind of like almost like a part two. Like 2 weeks ago, we did avoiding mistakes when buying a property. This one is a little bit different. As much as it's called avoid these mistakes, this is more of a best practices when it comes to selling your property. Yeah. Carmelo?
Yeah. No, again, it's gonna be a lot of information shared, and there's no one right way of doing it all, but
I mean, look, I think that like this is the big elephant in the room, and this is why we made it the first slide. Is just like ultimately, as much as we work in this industry, and obviously we're encouraging people to use professionals. With this, one mistake that we tend to see a lot is people not using professionals, are trying to do it themselves, or they're engaging professionals, but already when shit's hitting the fan, or when it's a lot more difficult to kind of dig yourself out of a situation. So yeah, we're going to share some tips here that without these tips, if you list your property and you kind of do it yourself, maybe you'll be able to navigate your way through it and find a buyer and close on the transaction. But the thing is that you're only going to have one opportunity to do this. This is for most people, selling their home is one of the biggest decisions of their life. So, why risk doing it yourself and potentially leaving money on the table when you can engage a professional to do it for you, and you get the benefit of somebody who's doing this day in and day out. And it's not like all professionals are not made alike. So I'm not talking about somebody who's like a part-time agent that maybe does one transaction a year. I mean like a professional who specializes in your area or in your property type.
Yeah, and the key thing is, again, is that these are, and they're big transactions. They're not really, they're not hard transactions, but if you don't know what you're doing, you could be leaving money on the table. And you could also be missing a lot of things and making mistakes that could be costly down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something evident. We didn't do a slide about this, but look, this just came to me. So quite often I get questions from sellers, they're thinking of selling their property. Do we do a renovation? Should we fix the kitchen, update the bathrooms? Do we do like top to bottom reno of the house so that we can get top dollar for it? Doing a renovation, yeah, a renovated property, like what we call a turnkey property, ready to just move in and not needing anything. Yeah, that will sell for more than a not renovated property. But one thing that we find is that it's super rare that somebody's actually going to be able to recover the money that they put into renovating their property when they sell. So the recommendation that I give people is like, look, if you want to renovate your property because you're planning to still live there for a couple of years and you want to, enjoy your property, enjoy the renovation, then go ahead, do it for you. But don't renovate a property with the intention of listing it to sell. You're not going to recover that money. And, the types of renovations that I do encourage people to do are small things, like painting the walls white, maybe adding some lighting, changing light switches, even like small things, like if you have like one of those old thermostats, going and getting a digital thermostat. Like, these are really small ticket items that can really enhance the way that your property looks. I mean, ultimately, you want to give people a kind of like a blank canvas to work with when they're coming in for showings. When they're looking at your property, you want them to envision themselves living there and not you living there. So, very much just in addition to that, like you want to, if you're going to be living in your property while it's for sale, you want to get rid of maybe any family heirlooms, family pictures, pictures of you with the dog, because when people come in and they start to see that, they're going to just get the energy of you living there again. Like you want to envision them living there. But yeah, you will basically, unless you're like a flipper and you have a renovation company, you're not going to be able to recover the money that you would put into doing like a top to bottom renovation. So just fix the things that are maybe out of order, add some paint, caulking, small cost items that will make your property look very clean without throwing tens of thousands of dollars into that, because you're not going to recover that money.
That's a good example why you should be working with a professional. All these things, Alex.
Yeah, well, it's yeah, like I get that a lot because especially like we watch like HGTV and all these selling Sunset, and people are coming in and these picturesque properties that have all the latest styling, finishing, appliances. Like yeah, it's you're like, do that if you want to live there. Buy the property, renovate it to your liking, but don't renovate it to your liking and then sell. And then sometimes I go into properties and they've been renovated, but it's like such a cheap quality renovation where the buyer would basically just want to like redo everything themselves anyway. So just give them a blank canvas to work with. Don't do any high ticket items unless it's like a hazard or like, I don't know, like something is broken or not working. I don't recommend touching that.
So let's move along to the next thing, right? The next common thing when it comes to try to avoid is if you're selling a property that's tenanted, whether it's a house, a condo, it's something you want to kind of avoid, right?
Yeah, this is something that we see a lot, especially in today's market, especially around condo sales. There are a lot, I think like about 50 or 60% of the condos that are on the market are tenanted right now because of the higher interest rates that we're in right now. Investors are kind of feeling the pinch. They're putting their property on the market. My recommendation is to have a conversation with your tenants and do something, if possible, to sell the property vacant. Not that you won't be able to sell a property with a tenant. It's just that there's going to be a haircut that you're going to need to take on that. So, that haircut can look like around probably maybe something like 10% of a vacant property or owner-occupied property compared to the same property with a tenant. But one of the things about like kind of like engaging professionals when you're thinking about selling your property is that we can have these conversations maybe in a different way with tenants. We can shed light. We can kind of explain this and kind of have that discussion in a more positive way.
At the same time, selling a property vacant, now you're attracting homeowners that are looking to buy the property, and you're still attracting investors that are looking to buy a property versus a property that's tenanted. You're going to see more, investors looking at the property only versus those who may want to move into it. So you kind of lose a segment of the market.
You do.
And your buyers.
You do. And there are some agents that just discourage their clients from looking at tenanted properties altogether.
Yeah.
Like there's also agents that discourage their clients from looking at properties that do that bidding war strategy, right? So there is potentially a risk that you're going to get less exposure with your property being tenanted, just because there is potentially more risk for the buyer if it happens that, and this is very, very rare, but if it does happen that the tenant is doesn't move out, they can blow up the transaction. So you want to avoid that.
Yeah. This is another common mistake. Now, the next one, Alex, again, this is a good one. I like this one.
Yeah, home inspection and status certificate. So, a lot of times when somebody buys a home, like for condos, some people don't do home inspections, but when somebody's buying a home, most of the time they put in a home inspection condition. So what I encourage my clients to do when they're selling their property is get ahead of that. So actually go get the home inspection done yourself, have the home inspection available at the home. Let agents know that we have a home inspection available. If you want a copy of that for your clients, send me an email. I'll forward it to you. Have a physical home inspection available at the open house so people can look through that. You want to be transparent. You want to build comfort for people, but you also want to give them a reason to put as few conditions as possible in their offer. So it's important. And at the same time, if there are any things that stand out about the property, like maybe there's a deficiency that needs to be fixed, you want to get ahead of that because you don't want somebody to then try to get out of a transaction and not go firm on their offer because something's identified in a home inspection. So it's better to be upfront with that. Same thing with status certificates. So the status certificate kind of gives you an understanding of the condominium corporation. This is only applicable for condo properties, not freehold properties. Gives you an understanding of the condo corp's financial state, legal state. We've encountered condos that somebody can't buy with less than 20% down, for example, because maybe they have a shortage on the reserve fund. So, disclosing that ahead of time to agents working with clients who are interested in your property, it's going to be beneficial to you because you're not going to be having offers that are going to come in, the property's going to be sold conditional, lawyer reviews the status certificate, the buyer now wants to back out, and the property goes back on the market, and now everybody's like thinking, what's going on here? Why did it sell but not sell?
it makes it a faster, smoother process, right? Because again, like you said, Alex, a home inspection, everything's on the table. Any deficiencies you can fix up front. Obviously, if you're in a condo, again, a home inspection is not really as important, but the stat certificate is, because again, the stat certificates provide for the buyer's lawyer to review, and even the buyer's, mortgage broker, right? Like myself, when I see people buying some condos, especially some older condos, I call the mortgage insurers directly to make sure you could buy this property with less than 20% down payment, right? Or what the requirements are. You want to know that in advance versus, your lawyer could look at the stat certificate, but then all of a sudden find out from the bank that they're not comfortable with this property. CMHC, not comfortable because they've lent money on this property before, and there's been, always an issue with the cash reserves, right? That's the last thing you want. You don't want to find that out afterwards after you waive financing, right? So you get this certificate up front. As a seller, you're giving that buyer the information up front so they could do all their due diligence for a smooth closing.
Yeah, without tying you in an offer and then just to kind of like have it not go anywhere because they identify something. So for myself, whenever I list a freehold property, we always get a home inspection before the fact, before it's on the MLS. And anytime I list a condo property, I always order the status certificate right away. It does sometimes take a week or even 2 to get the status certificate because it's the condo corp's property manager that creates it for them. So you want to kind of be ahead of that. But yeah, it's ultimately about having buyers give you offers with as few conditions as possible in them.
Yeah,
that's what it's about. And here's another one too, right? Like when when I'm having conversations with sellers and they're trying to determine, maybe they bought another property, they need to know how much they have to get for their home, or they just want to sell their home, whatever. Maybe they're retiring, they want to have a idea of that. A lot of times they don't factor in the closing costs that a seller would have. So we kind of just broke down the closing costs here, Carmelo, if you want to go through them.
When you're selling a home, there's a lot of things involved. And especially if you're selling a home to buy another property, getting the numbers right done the first time is going to save you a lot of money and a lot of stress. Because if you want to do the calculations on your own, like estimate what the real estate commissions are, you need to calculate what the legal fees are for both buying and selling at times. If you're with your mortgage, there may be penalties you never thought of. You may think, my penalties will only be X amount of money, but the reality is it may be higher. You may be able to report your mortgage. You have to pay off for rental equipment. If you're buying and there's no home inspection, you may have to pay for it. You have to pay for a stat certificate. If you're selling an investment property, there's capital gains involved, right? So all of a sudden you think you're getting X amount of money. Well, you got to put some money aside for the tax man, right? Yep. So, to do these calculations, they're not hard calculations, but if you don't know how to do it and you're doing it yourself, there's a good chance you're gonna be missing a few things.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're selling your home, and especially if you're selling it to buy, because I work with a lot of people selling and buying, and when I hear their numbers when it comes to selling, and then I kind of go through it, and I go over with them, like, Carmelo, I never thought about that. Oh, I'm buying as well. I need to put money for land transfer tax. I don't get that first-time buyer's credit. What you could actually put for a down payment is a lot lower than you may think it will be.
Yeah. And as far as like the capital gains tax portion of it, like this is something you probably want to like have a conversation with your accountant about before you list your property, just to let them know you want to sell it, and so that you can understand what you may need to pay as far as capital gains taxes.
For capital gains, just as a reminder, it's only on investment property. If you're selling your principal residence, you don't really have to worry too much about capital gains.
Another one here, market timing. So, if you want to sell your home, don't list it on Christmas Day. Generally there's 2 markets in GTA real estate, and most of our real estate sells in the spring. Like we're in the spring market now. As much as it doesn't seem like a normal spring market, just because of the higher interest rates and kind of everybody's in, waiting for rate cuts or analyzing the market or kind of window shopping. Really the best times are the spring and then the fall, like maybe a week after Labor Day. There's not a lot of real estate transactions that happen first 2 weeks of July, last 2 weeks of August, the month of December. So you want to time, when you're listing your property around that. You also want to look at things like March break, keep in mind that people are going to be away. You're going to probably have less showings on March break or during stat holidays. So as much as possible, the most your property's going to get the most exposure when it just hits the market. So, and that's what's going to get the most attention, the most showings. So you want to kind of look at the calendar and see what's going on around the time when you're going to be selling. And my recommendation is to sell in the spring, as much as the spring officially starts at some point. I don't know when it starts, April or May. The real estate spring market starts around February, because most buyers get into home shopping mode after New Year's, after the winter holidays. And it's a lot quicker for a buyer to come to the market than a seller. So what you find is that in the month of February, selling prices are actually significantly higher than later on in the spring, just because buyers have fewer options at that time.
And buyers
it takes sellers longer to get their property ready.
And Alex, are not buyers thinking about, okay, I'm buying now in February, March, closing May, June, July, right?
Yeah.
Because again, they're closing. Okay, I got kids in school. The kids, I got to close the end of June. I got to close in July, but they're not buying in May, closing 2 months later, right? So the time we may think of when the good time to buy. I don't know. It's knowing knowing when to do it versus what you're guessing.
I guess. I mean, the good time to sell. The good time to buy is probably in December.
Alex, you mentioned Christmas Day. It was a few years ago. I did get a call on Christmas Day. Somebody got an accepted offer.
Yeah, of course.
But again, for the seller, it wasn't ideal. My buyer got a steal.
Yeah, that's what it is. Like, if you're looking for a deal, then go look for a property Christmas holidays. You might not have a lot of options to choose from, but if somebody's selling their home over the holidays, especially if they just listed, that doesn't scream non-motivated seller to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was kind of curious about this one, like do-it-yourself financing. Is that something that people can do?
Well, again, it's like, a lot of people, when they go to get a mortgage, they kind of do it on their own, meaning they go to their bank and they speak to the person across the desk who does their credit card, their banking statements, their RSPs, and tax receipts account, but also does a mortgage. They may be missing out with regards to things that they're not aware of. When it comes to, if you're selling your home, you may be able to report your mortgage. I know do all the calculations when it comes to the cost of selling, the cost of buying. If you purchased your first home with less than 20% down payment, Alex, did you know that CMHC premium can be moved to the next home?
No.
Right? So these are things when it comes to, if you're selling your home, you want to work with someone that knows how to do the math and even can help you port your mortgage and help you avoid paying penalties. Right? If you're mortgaged with one bank and then you all of a sudden you move banks, but you weren't happy with them, that new bank's they're not interested in helping you saving penalties. They're just interested in getting you the new mortgage. Yeah. Right? So you can do the financing on your own, but if you don't know how to do all these calculations, I've seen people come to trouble and then contact me way afterwards, like a week before closing, saying, "Carmelo, I need help." Ooh, it could be. It gets done, but it's. I know that all those people I've helped in the past like that, they go through a stressful week.
Yeah. So we have a question in the chat. We'll just answer that at the end. When we talk about timing of selling and buying, another thing that is just like you want to be able to time your closing. You want to also understand that if you are selling your property on a certain date and then you bought another property and the closing on that is a month later, where are you going to go for a month?
Yeah. So buying or selling your home, again, it's hard to pick the dates, but the ideal situation is buying a home a few days before the sale of your home, right? It gives you a few days to move in advance. And again, it avoids the stress of trying to do it all on the same day. I know people who bought and sold on the same day, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying you can't do it, but it's a lot of stress that you could avoid trying to sell the same day versus, and like you said, Alex, again, if you sold first and then your purchase closes a week later, a few days later, like we're gonna hold all your stuff in storage. You're really gonna be moving twice. We're gonna live, we're gonna sleep for those few days. Yeah. Right. So the timing of the sale when you buy your home is important. Try to find something that works in your best interest. And usually it's trying to close that purchase a few days before the sale of your home.
Yeah, usually the purchase is going to close second half of the day. I've never seen it close before lunch, probably around 3, 4, maybe as late as 5 o'clock, right? So if you bought something and you sold your property, you have to be out of your property, but you don't yet have the keys to get into your new property, or let's say something goes wrong and maybe the lawyers, they can't close that day, they're going to close the next day.
Yeah,
you're just kind of going to be caught in limbo. Or if you didn't look at the calendar and you put your closing as a stat holiday without realizing it and nobody caught that, well, you're obviously not going to be closing on a stat holiday. I don't recommend also closing on a Friday because, again, if something goes wrong, you're going to have to wait until Monday to close. So, just kind of like, I know for me, when I do an offer and I'm putting closing, I always automatically just look stat holidays Ontario and just make sure that we're not around any stat holidays, just so that there's nothing that can come up.
Yeah, and it kind of coincides with the next thing, right?
Yeah.
The next thing, if you're buying your home first and you're closing it first, you have time to move all your stuff in advance. You got a few days, and the banks will give you bridge financing. Now, the big fear is oh my God, it's another expense. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that much, because bridge financing, what that is the equity that you have from the sale of your home that you can be using towards the purchase of your new home. The cost really isn't that expensive. For every $100,000 you borrow, it's usually about $25, $26 per day. And if you're only doing it for a few days, the stress that involved in trying to move on the same day or within 24 hours is quite high. If you could give yourself 3 days to get everything done, especially if you get lucky to do it on a weekend where you don't have to go to work and do your job, spending a few $100s to get bridge financing to have a smooth purchase, smooth sale. Now when you give your keys in, it's going to be boom swept condition. The buyers aren't going to complain about anything. There's no damages, and you have a lot of time to move your stuff in too and get it organized while you still own two properties. So it makes things a lot easier.
Is there a specific lender they need to go to for bridge financing, or do all the lenders do it?
I'm going to say a majority of the banks will do the help you with the purchase. We'll do the bridge financing. There's literally less than a handful that I work with that I know that don't. So
what's the conditions? Just like a firm accepted offer? As
long as you have a firm sale, the banks will need a firm sale agreement, a mortgage statement, so they could calculate, how much equity you have in your property. And that's the amount of money. I do those calculations for you. That's the amount of money you're going to need to be putting forward your down payment on your purchase anyways. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's really that down payment that you're going to use from the sale. That's what the bank's going to be bridging.
Nice. Okay. So this is our presentation, on this topic. So as we said in the beginning, this is, as much as we called it avoiding these mistakes, really what this is best practices when you're selling your property. Because even if you don't do a bunch of these, potentially you still will sell your property, but you only have one opportunity to do this. It's not like you can do an A/B test. So, you'll sell it for what you'll sell it for, but it's also kind of about knowing that you did all these extra steps. You took the right process in getting that done. And I think the key is, working with a professional and not trying to do it yourself, because, as much as maybe you think that, you can maybe save real estate commissions by selling your property yourself or using some, service to just list your property on the MLS for you. There's more that goes into it than just preparing your property for sale. It's also like the negotiation of the sale. It's knowing the market, and having like a House Sigma app is not knowing the market. Yes. You can see what homes sold for, or when the open house is, or what the AI thinks that the value of the property is, but that's always I don't know. It's not very accurate. Sometimes I see these values and what properties actually sell for, and it's not in line. It seems like when they calculate value, it's basically just looking what was the last property of this type and what did it sell for, something comparable.
Again, it doesn't have to be a stressful situation, right? So if I hope we got some tips from this, practices that you could hopefully use. We do have one question in the chat, and